Welcome to 5% Radio, where it's all about learning like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Please be sure to share and subscribe. What is up, and welcome back to another episode of 5% Radio. Today is actually episode number 21, and today I will be telling a story of a man we are all extremely familiar with, while sharing some key examples and success principles demonstrated in his personal journey of dream, struggle, victory. And for those of you wondering what in the world is up with the title today, well, you're going to find out soon. But I want to start us off with a few quotes before we actually get into the story. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. That was Helen Keller. And Thomas Edison said most of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And the last two quotes, Orrin Woodward said, many people dream, a few dream big, but only a few dream big for long. And one of my absolute favorites of all time, all men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds awake to find that it was in vanity, but the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, that they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible. T.E. Lawrence. Story time. So this man was born December 5th, 1901, in Hermosa, Chicago, Illinois. He was actually the fourth of five children. He had three brothers and one sister, and he was born to a Midwest farm family, and his family had very little money. They were impoverished, they were poor, they were not well off by any means. But as a young boy, despite his father's blatant disapproval and criticism regarding his interest in art and belief that really the young man should be engaging in hard physical labor from a young age instead of drawing, he developed an early interest in drawing and art, which he would actually practice drawing the cartoons from the front of his father's newspaper on a very regular basis, which actually helped him begin developing his artistic ability further. Now, I want to stop here and teach principles as we go through this story, but notice right off the bat, he's a young kid. His father thinks his hobby, his passion, what he enjoys doing is stupid, but despite that, as a young kid, he continues to do it. A person who he probably wanted support and approval from the most, his own dad, was not only unsupportive, but his dad was actually critical, and he would be very vocal about this. He was harsh with this young man, but he pressed on anyway. And on top of drawing, he would practice, and eventually he developed more skill with watercolors and crayons. And I know you're thinking, what the heck? Okay, we're talking about crayons. What's up with the title? Just bear with me here. This is a phenomenal story, and when you realize who this is, I promise you're going to be blown away. In one rare instance that his mother was actually able to intervene on her son's behalf between the father and the son when, they're having kind of a feud and the dad's kind of chewing out the boy, and she convinced the boy's father to actually buy him a set of colored pencils and some drawing paper, even though he was opposed to it, even though we thought, you should be working, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing anything really fun, you should be doing physical labor. We're on a farm, and I believe that you should be working instead of playing or having any sort of hobby, even though you're just a kid. The mom wins this intervention, and eventually the dad led to buying colored pencils and some drawing paper, which in turn led to even more time spent practicing drawing and art. At 10 years old, this young man and his family moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where he attended Benton Grammar School, and he actually met and befriended a fellow student named Walter Pfeiffer. Now, the Pfeiffer family, they were fans of the theater, and they introduced this young man to the vaudeville, which is actually, they made a bunch of movies back in the day, and he grew to love these movies so much, and that kid's family loved movies, they loved the theater, they loved moving pictures, that he actually ended up spending more time at the Pfeiffer home than his own house, largely in part of his father, not approving of anything to do with his hobby or moving pictures or basically anything outside of work. So this young man begins to spend more and more time with this family. And when he was not with the Pfeiffer family, he spent much of his time alone due to the fact that, yes, he was the fourth of five children, but due to the fact that his brother closest in age, Ray, was 8 years older. So it's not like, he didn't really have anyone near his age to hang out with. So he actually spent a lot of his time with the farm animals, and he claimed as a young boy and even later on in his life that those really were his friends. And in particular, one of them was said to be his childhood best friend. It was a pig on the farm named Porker. This pig was known to be mischievous and basically very playful for an animal, and And he actually would hop on this pig. He loved it so much, he would hop on this pig and ride it around, and the pig was said to be more than willing to be a participant. So spending so much time alone and with these animals forced this young man to develop a phenomenal lifelike imagination, even as a little kid, which, as we'll see later, was one of the biggest assets that really made him truly great in what he was doing. So back to the story, Elias, who was the boy's father, was a very strict man. He didn't really believe in any playtime, games, or even toys for his children. Can you imagine this? As a child, your dad does not believe in play, any sort of games, or really even toys for you as a child, but instead he believes in basically lots and lots and lots of hard work. Now, when I say a child, I'm not saying that he was 15 years old. I'm saying like as a little kid, his dad believed that you should be working instead of playing, even as a little kid. Now, that to an extent can be good to instill a work ethic, but this man was, kind of a slave driver, heavy-handed, harsh, critical, really not warm, fuzzy by any means. He was a hard guy to live with, or at least he would have been. But this young man, this is what he was growing up with. He's got this dream that I want to draw, I want to be an artist, and this is his hobby. And he spends all his spare time with his dad in the background and in front of him, blatantly and openly criticizing, I don't think you should be doing that. That's not what boys your age, blah, 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 just all the time. So while he's still very young and he's wanting to draw, he's wanting to be an artist, this boy's father purchases a newspaper route, which he actually made these two young men, Roy and the younger brother, who I'm telling the story about, run. He makes them run the paper route, waking them up at 3 a.m. every day before school to deliver papers, and then afterwards they would go to school. So they would deliver papers at 3:30 a.m. After that, they would go to school, they would come home, they would deliver papers again to finish off the evening paper route, and it was actually between this paper route and their homework and living on a farm, it was said that they basically spent most of their childhood rather exhausted because you're waking up way before the sun, you're going to school, so you basically have a job in the morning, you go to work. As a kid, school is work. You go to work, you sit there, you do your homework, all that stuff. You're in school, you come home, you go to a paper route, you probably have farm chores, and then, okay, you've got a few minutes to yourself. And they were basically said to be exhausted during their childhood growing up. But between this paper route and everything else, they're absolutely exhausted. And it was actually said that the two older brothers left home. So the two older brothers, older than Roy, left home when they were old enough to do so because their father was so terrible to live with, and they actually were not involved basically with the family or this young man's life at all after that. They just could not wait to get out of the house. That's how bad things were with Dad. So I want to pause here and just take notice that although this probably sucked terribly as a kid, there is a positive, and that this actually instilled hard work and hard work ethic, a great work ethic into this kid at a very, very, very young age, which I'm sure as he looked back later on reflecting on his life, he realized, man, that was actually an advantage, even though it was no fun then, even though it was terrible, even though I would have done anything to make it different. Looking back, hindsight is 20/20. As he looked in the rearview mirror of his life, he could probably see, you know what, that was actually for my benefit, and it came in handy. It was actually something helpful in my growth and development as a young person. So to top it all off, their father didn't even let them keep the money. Like, come on, man. Didn't even let them keep the money. Wake them up at 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, go to school, deliver papers before school, come home, deliver papers, probably do farm chores, and then you don't even get to keep the money. And here was his reasoning, because he believed that they were too young to understand its value. So in spite of all this, the young man still managed to take art classes on Saturdays at the Kansas City Art Institute, as well as a correspondence course in drawing cartoons. So he's still chasing his passion. Even though there's all these things in his way, he's still chasing his passion. He's still making time for what he loves and ultimately what would become his dream as he got older. At the age of 16, his father actually moved the family back to Chicago from Missouri, where he would attend McKinney High School, and he actually ended up being the cartoonist for the school's newspaper, drawing mostly patriotic cartoons due to the involvement of the U.S. in World War I at this time. But he also began attending evening classes now at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. So now he's taken his passion, he's worked on it, he's drawn, pictures out of the newspaper. He's tracing those, man, how can I make my pictures look like those, and what did they do differently, and how did they get that edge, and how can I work on this, and how can I work on that? Even though he's a little kid, he's actively getting better. He's practicing over and over and over again. And then as he grows up, he gets a little more art supplies, and he kind of dives into this area, and he begins to work on crayons and water paints and colored pencils and all this different stuff. And now he's finally taking art classes, another art class, and now he's at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, probably a cut above anything else he's ever done, and looking to get away from his father, At this time in his life, he actually tried to join the war in 1918 for World War I, but due to the fact that he was under 18, the Army refused him, and so, not to be stopped by the facts, he forged the date of his birth certificate and was successfully, enrolled or was able to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver and was later actually sent to France. I just finished reading the autobiography of Ray Kroc, who really is the man that made McDonald's what it is today, and this man actually met Ray Kroc, who went on to make McDonald's the empire that we know it as now. He didn't found McDonald's. If you're looking for more information on this, you can do one of two things. You can look at the movie The Founder. That's a movie basically about the rise of McDonald's and the man that was behind it. Or you can read his autobiography or listen to the, if there's an audiobook, I'm not sure. I just read the autobiography, but it's called Grinding It Out, The Making of McDonald's. It was a phenomenal book, but he actually mentioned this man in his own personal story because at the age of 17, Ray Kroc wanted to join the war. His parents were opposed to it, and he ended up forging his date of birth to get into the Red Cross as an ambulance driver as well. And he said this in his autobiography, and I quote him directly here. In my company, which assembled in Connecticut for training, was another fellow who had lied about his age to get in. He was regarded as a strange duck because whenever we had time off and went out on the town to chase girls, he stayed in the camp drawing pictures. His name was, I'll get to that at the end of the episode, but it's crazy that these two men met. But even back then, even as a young man, he's overseas. Now, France, they had just signed the armistice by the time he actually ended up getting there to help out with the war effort. So basically, he just spent the majority of his time drawing cartoons on the side of his ambulance, some of which, by the way, his work was actually published in the Stars and Stripes, which was the Army's newspaper. But so this man was essentially deployed to help out, and he was even focused over there, even on the weekends when the other guys, we've got free time, it's the weekend, we're away from home, I'm lonely, I'm hanging out with a bunch of dudes all the time. They're all wanting to go to hang out and try to find a date, get a gal. He's still focused on his craft. He's still focused on his dream, practicing over and over. His passion kept him focused on what he really wanted to do. And after spending nearly a year in France, he went back home to Kansas City, where he was hired actually as an apprentice for the Pestman Rubin Commercial Art Studio, and this is where his real career began. Now he really starts getting paid to do what he loves. So he gets hired at this place, the Pestman Rubin Commercial Art Studio. He starts getting paid to do what he loves, and not too long after he starts working at this apprenticeship, he really becomes convinced that I can make a living out of my passion. For sure, I know I can do this. Never giving up on his dream against the opinion of his father, against all these other things that have already happened in his life, the tough upbringing, being poor, being alone, hanging out with farm animals, your best friend's a pig for Pete's sake, all that. He's still got this dream. I can make it, I can make it, I can make it. And he actually launched his own company. He was young, but he launched his own company called Laugh-O-Gram Studio. And he started producing these things called Laugh-O-Grams. And these were funny little cartoons, and people liked them and started buying them. And at this point, he's in his mid-20s, and he becomes nationally known, starts getting all kinds of praise, and then first major setback, his company goes bankrupt, only operating from June 28th of 1921 to November 20th of 1923, so he really was not even in business that long, and he goes bankrupt. Now, think about this. If he had quit here, number one, I would not be telling you the story, but how do you think the "I told you so, son, it's time to grow up, give up the stupid dream, and get a real job," how do you think that would have felt at the time? Because I'm sure he heard that. I'm sure that his dad was more than happy to chime in. And just to be clear, I've got an awesome relationship with my dad, but I'm proving a point with this story. Like, he had a major critic that would have been the person that he wanted approval of most. So at this time, I'm guaranteeing that his dad was telling him, "I told you so, son." He probably even had some other family members and friends like, "Man, maybe that's not for you. You should probably go get a real job. You went bankrupt, blah, blah." Because that was a bigger deal back then than it is now. Nowadays, "Oh, we went bankrupt. It's not a big deal. We'll just that was a bigger deal back then because debt was not a common thing. And going bankrupt was not as, I just sweep it under the rug. Not a big deal. Been bankrupt 4 times. It was different then than it is now. But again, back to the Winston Churchill quote. He got back up, he tried again. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And he chooses to have the courage to continue. So he loses everything. And he realized, maybe I was too young to start my own company. Maybe what I need to do is work for somebody else for a while to get some more experience before I do it again. But I will own my own company again, still focused on his dream. So he goes to take a job working for a newspaper as a graphic artist. He works for just over a year and ends up getting fired. And get this, the editor told him, "You don't have enough creativity to be a graphic artist." So again, here's another critic. Now here's someone who's actually, a credential, like they know what they're doing. They do this for a living, and they're telling him, you don't have what it takes to do what you want to do. Still focused on his dream. At this point, he loses everything again. So he went bankrupt. He gets this job, starts working, ends up getting fired, gets told by a person who is a professional at what he does, an editor of the work that he was doing, you don't have what it takes to do this. You're not creative enough to be a graphic artist. He loses everything again. And at this point, he's so low that he can't even afford to pay his rent. He couldn't buy clothes. He can't even buy food. But because he had some success in the past, a local dentist, the guy's name was Dr. Thomas McCrum, reaches out to him, and this dentist wanted to teach kids how to ensure that they made a regular habit of properly brushing their teeth. And he said, you know what, I know this young man's got some talent. I know he can do this. He says, I'd love for you to come and do a series of cartoons to teach kids how to brush their teeth and the importance of it. Now, obviously, if you were him at this point, you would definitely want to take that job, but he didn't even have shoes to wear to the interview. And just to really put things into perspective, so he's contemplating canceling the interview. He can't even buy himself food, pay rent, doesn't even have enough money to buy himself a single pair of shoes. One pair of shoes. He couldn't do it. So he's contemplating canceling the interview. And after 11 and a half years of having this dream to be an artist, he couldn't even buy himself a single pair of shoes. Now, let's stop for some real perspective here. Compared to what this dude's going through at this point in his life, chasing his dream, do you and I really have problems? Because, you're probably driving down the road right now or sitting somewhere with air conditioning. You're listening to this on an expensive cell phone with some money in the bank. You've got steady work. You have nice clothes, comfy place to live. And this guy can't even afford to buy himself one pair of shoes. Just, really, put that into perspective. Whatever struggle you have chasing what it is that you want right now. So moving on, instead of becoming a victim and saying, well, my socioeconomic status, my education, my IQ, my age, my gender, my lack of opportunity, my last name, my financial resources, you don't understand, blah, 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 I don't have any shoes to wear to the interview. Instead of doing this, he's wondering to himself, okay, how can I problem solve this? I want the job, but I don't want to embarrass myself by showing up to Dr. McCrum's office without shoes. It's not really something that I can just kind of casually explain away. Think. How can I make this work? Now, somehow, through the grapevine of association, the doctor had heard about this poor kid's circumstances financially, and knowing that he had the talent and having confidence in this young man's ability to get the job done because of his experience, because of what he had done in the past, and out of the goodness of his heart, the doctor fronted this young man $500, which today would be equivalent to roughly $5,000-ish. And he told him, this is a deposit on the work I'd like you to do. And that young man, who could not afford to buy himself shoes, that just got this $500 deposit on the future work, ends up creating Tommy Tucker Toothbrush, or Tommy Toothbrush, as it was known. And that is really what launched this young man, really what helped him get back on his feet. It gave him enough money to pay his bills and really start dreaming again, because he hadn't given up, but honestly, having not even enough money to eat and barely being able to stay living indoors at this time, probably not even being able to buy yourself one pair of shoes. I keep going back to that, but for Pete's sake, it's a cotton picking pair of shoes. He can't even afford to buy one pair. He's that broke. And this finally gave him enough breathing room. Just, okay, I can get back on my feet. I can keep dreaming. I can go after it again. Let me ask you this. Would you have kept moving forward after all of that? Because any reasonable person would have quit. They would have said that's completely okay. Look, if you gave up after all that, at least you tried. Man, you did all you could do. You tried your best, and people, you did everything. Look, I wouldn't blame you if you quit. I would have quit too if I were you. It's okay. Just, at least you tried. But his dream was bigger. It was bigger than his reality. Henry Ford said this. He said, obstacles are those frightful things you see when you take your eyes off your goal. So back to our story. So this gave him some positive momentum in life, and once more, that led him to his next accomplishment, which was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And this character became fairly well known in the movie field, but he didn't really understand enough about business, and he ended up signing over all the creative rights to the person he was working for. And now, even though he made the success, he just got that money from the dentist, he ends up going on to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Again, it's starting to look like he's making it. Man, I'm climbing the top of the mountain. I'm doing great. It's starting to look like he's going to get there, and he loses it again because this guy takes the rights to it. So even though he created it, even though he was the artist that drew it, even though people knew it was his, it gets taken. So the owner took it and told him he was no longer even able to produce it. His own creation, a big success, is now gone. In success, you will move forward, and then you'll move back 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps backward. Like, you'll feel like I'm making progress. Finally, I'm out of the struggles, and you'll have a bigger struggle than ever. And you'll make some more progress, and you'll fall backwards, and you'll make some more progress, and you'll fall backwards. And one of my friends, Josh Coffey, he gives the analogy of, if you're climbing a mountain, there's switchbacks. There's going to be times where you have to almost go down and around an obstacle in order to go up, and there's no other way to do it. And this is how success really works. So this man loses everything again, and now he's 15 years into this dream, still looking like a failure to the outside world, who has had his head stuck in the clouds and refuses to settle, even though everyone believes in the back of their brains or on the front of their lips, like his dad, you're probably never going to make it anyway. And all he has to show for all of his hard work is experience at this point. He doesn't even have the cartoon that he drew that kind of helped him, quote unquote, start to make it. He doesn't even have that. All he has, he's back to experience, 15 years in, probably day after day after day after day after day, all the way back to, I bet he's thinking, he's reminiscing on, man, I was drawing these cartoons out of the newspaper from my dad. I loved it then. I still love it now, but man, is this ever going to work for me? Am I ever going to make it? And this brings me to what Steve Larson, he's a marketing guy, he's a business guy that I follow, he calls the parallel journey. And he talks about there's 2 journeys, and as you progress outwardly in your field, your career, your goals, there's also another journey going on inwardly through the challenges, through the struggles, through losing and being, quote-unquote, defeated over and over and over again. You begin to grow as a person. So as I advance outwardly, as I want to grow and change things on the outside, I have to also grow by default things on the inside. So there's this parallel journey that is going on. And as Orrin Woodward says, he tells this story about this young man, and he says, if your reality isn't working, you have to deal with your reality, but you must always live in your dreams. There's a parallel journey. The outside, I'm advancing, then I'm falling back, and inwardly, I'm growing, and finally, the inward growth comes to the outside, and I actually progress on my journey. I fall back, I have to grow internally again, I progress a little bit more. But you've got to deal with reality. I've got to deal with the outside, but I've got to live in my dreams. I've got to focus on what's inside. I've got to focus on the driver for me to continue. So this young man, dream in his heart, mind continually filled with a huge imagination, experience inside him, and hard lessons learned in the rearview mirror, continues on this journey to reach his dream. All of this combined give him the drive to try again, which leads to his next venture, starting out as Mortimer the Mouse. Now, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say none of you have heard of Mortimer the Mouse, but I'm highly confident that you've heard of Mickey the Mouse, or Mickey Mouse, the name that was actually his wife's idea. Now remember, all the time he spent with animals back on the farm as a little kid, his best friends, as he put it. This is why so many of this man's movies, so many of his drawings, his artwork, his characters were based on and centered around animals acting as humans, real life people like characters, even though they're animals. And actually, the foolish pig from Three Little Pigs was based on and modeled after his childhood best friend, Porker, which was the family's Missouri farm pig that he used to ride growing up. So now his career continues. He launches Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which, by the way, changed everything for animated pictures. It was a technological marvel that revolutionized the way animated films were made, and it started the time-proving construction of what some animated narratives still use today. And even after movies like this and other big hits, he goes to the circus one day with his kids. And he's thinking, man, this is terrible. The food's not good. It's dirty. It's not even really a place that you'd want to take kids. You know what we need to do? Man, we could create some characters. We could use some of our movie things, and let's do Disneyland. What's this man's name? Walter Elias Disney. As we know him today, Walt Disney. Now think about this, all that he went through just to become the guy that we know today, and he's not even at the peak of his career yet, and he's gone through all of that already. So at this point, his older brother, Ray, the one that was 8 years older than him, that was the closest sibling to him, but they didn't really spend a ton of time together. Ray was always the cheerleader. He was always trying to kind of shelter him from the mean words of his dad, And Ray, who said, man, I knew Walt always had talent. He was his greatest encourager. He tried to keep him away from the critical words of Dad, and this guy was Walt's greatest cheerleader in life. And when Walt Disney says, we should do this thing called Disneyland, let's buy some land right here in Anaheim, California, and we can make a theme park. Here's what Roy says. It's not economically feasible. His biggest cheerleader, the guy that's always been with him, who's always believed in him. You can do it, Walt. I believe in you. Don't care what Dad says. Don't care that you failed again. Don't care that you went bankrupt. It doesn't matter. You can do it. Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we do this theme park called Disneyland? It's not economically feasible. Let's stick to movies, is what Roy said. By 2014, there were 16.77 million people that had visited that not so economically feasible enterprise. So despite all the setbacks, all the challenges, the bankruptcy, not being able to pay rent, buy food, or afford a single pair of shoes for himself to go to an interview, regardless of his dad's unending criticism and losing the rights to his own creation, and right when it looked like he was starting to make it, and then it goes back, and his number one encourager doesn't even believe in his idea, his imagination, determination, and dream were strong enough to pull him through. And he went on to hold the record for the most Academy Awards earned and nominations by an individual, having won 22 Oscars from 59 nominations. He was presented with 2 Golden Globe Special Achievement Awards and an Emmy Award, among other honors. Several of his films are included in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress and have also been named some of the greatest films ever by the American Film Institute. And he became the first person ever to be nominated for Academy Awards in 6 different categories. Now, I'll tell you the story. It's an incredible, amazing story of a man that we all know, of a company that's gone on to become huge. But let me ask you this, because his imagination, his belief, his determination, his courage, his confidence, his dream, his everything was strong enough to pull him through all of those struggles. Having that critic who should have been an encourager, having his best friend, not the pig, not Porker, but his brother, his closest one to him, his cheerleader, the number one guy in his life, having him tell him, I don't think that idea is economically feasible. Let's stick to movies. And he went forward and did it anyway. I say all that to say this: is your imagination, dream, determination, belief in yourself and your dream, passion, is that strong enough to pull you through whatever it's going to take for you to make it? Because there will be setbacks. There will be times where you move forward and you come backward. There will be times when you have critics of people that should be on your side, that should be pulling for you, that should be rooting for you, that should be in your corner, so to speak, and they're not going to be in your corner. Not only that, they'll be on the opposition's team, cheering against you, booing you, telling you you can't do it, you can't make it, you're stupid for even trying. There will be those people. There will be those circumstances. Is your imagination, is your why, your dream, your drive, is it big enough to pull you through the challenges that are guaranteed to come your way? I hope it is. I hope you're willing to do whatever it takes to go through as much struggle as you need to go through as many financial struggles, to go through as many relational struggles, criticism from people that you never thought would be against you. I hope you're willing to do whatever it takes to get your dream, because I want you to chase the thing that's burning inside you, and I believe that you can do it if you refuse to quit, just like Walt Disney did. Did you enjoy the episode? I hope so. And sometimes I'll ask people to share the show, but today I really want to know, what positive changes have you made from listening to this content? If there's any, go in the show notes below and you can submit a weekly win. I really want to hear how this has helped change your life in any way, big or small, or if you've shared it with someone else and it's positively impacted them. If so, either way, you can go to the show notes below. That's option 1. You can go to the show notes below and submit a weekly win, or you can go to www.5%radioallspelledout.com/wins, WINS, and that will actually take you to the page to submit that weekly win, and I will put that in a future episode coming up. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the show, and I will talk to you in the next episode.